Hey guys, this is a great time to be an Isaac fan, because the game just got a new free DLC called Repentance Plus. The two main features of this update are a new online co-op mode, as well as buffs to many previously lackluster items. This video will be a quick showcase of every single item buff that came with Repentance Plus, so let's jump right into it. First up is the lemon mishap. The puddle created by the item is now slightly larger, and it will stay in the room until you leave it instead of being time-based. This makes it much better for boss fights, and you can even spawn multiple puddles if you have a way to recharge the item in the same room. Tammy's head also got a slight buff by basically removing its use animation. This allows you to use the item while shooting tears without having to stop doing so. A good and simple change, but I wish they would have done the same for Isaac's tears. Data miner was always an item that most of the community hated or wanted to see getting buffed. The day for this has finally come, and you can be the judge if it is enough or not. The item basically does all the things it previously did, nothing was removed there, but on top of that it will now also reroll all items in the current room into glitched items. Certainly a fun buff for those of you who like a little bit of chaos. Milk was always an item that just existed without ever getting much attention. This may change now with the buff it got. Instead of spilling as soon as Isaac gets hit, the milk familiar will now be able to absorb shots, like many other familiars do. As soon as it gets hit 10 times, which can be done by absorbing shots or getting in contact with enemies, the milk will spill and grant Isaac +1 fire rate as usual. However, this buff will now last for the entire floor instead of the current room, and the milk will only respawn on the next one. Delirious is an item that I'm really happy to see getting buffed, as it was my suggestion for an item in need of a rework in a video I made a few weeks ago together with 9 other Isaac YouTubers. The boss spawned by Delirious will now persist between rooms. There is no limit to the amount of rooms. The boss will stay until it dies from taking damage, and it will even go with you to the next floor. It is important to note that you can only have one Delirious summon active at a time. If you use the item again, the previous boss will be replaced. The charge amount of the item will also vary now, instead of always being at 12. The charge ranges from 6 to 12, depending on the power level of the previously summoned boss. All in all, a great rework that finally makes the item worth picking up, and you will most likely have a very high uptime for the summon. The Jar of Wisps got a simple yet powerful buff. It basically works the same as it always did, but with the slight twist of getting its required charge cut in half from 12 to 6. This allows you to stack up the wisp count twice as fast, which will hopefully make more people pick up the item. Next up in line is the Dead Bird item, which will now stay active between rooms instead of just for the current room, while your character is at exactly half a red heart. It will stay active even when you have soul or black hearts above the half red heart, but you do need that half red heart. It will not stay active if you have empty or no red health at all. And since this is an Eve starting item, it also got the same treatment as the Whore of Babylon. When you play Eve, the bird will stay active while you are at one full red heart instead of a half one, so that you can have both her passive items active at the same time. Let's stay at character starting items for a bit. Probably the simplest buff in the update came to the Void, which now has a required charge of 4 instead of 6, no matter if you play Apollyon or find it with another character. Tainted Apollyon starting item Abyss also got its long-awaited buff. The damage of the locusts will now depend on the quality of the items they were made of. For example, a quality 0 locust deals 1.8 damage per tick, which will then rise with higher qualities. Quality 1 locusts deal 2.6, quality 2 locusts deal 3.5, quality 3 locusts deal 5.3, and quality 4 locusts deal 7 damage respectively. But that's not all there is to this buff. There are also a bunch of new unique locust synergies for specific items, which I will showcase in detail in a video soon when they have all been discovered. Rounding up the character starting items, we have the Flip item, which also got its required charge reduced from 6 to 4. However, it is important to note that this specific change only applies to Tainted Lazarus himself, and not any other character that finds the item. It is probably up for debate if this counts as a buff or not, but the portable slot item got removed from the shop item pool and can now be found as a reward from an exploding slot machine instead. The Epiphora item got a slight quality of life buff. The tier stat upgrade you get from firing in the same direction for a while is now accumulated in a smooth increase instead of a fixed amount every few seconds. The God's Flesh item also got a long-awaited buff targeted at the main problems players had with its effect. First of all, the chance of firing a shrink tier is doubled from 10 to 20%, which is already good. But more importantly, enemies will now flash white shortly before they turn back to normal, so that you don't accidentally take damage if you try to walk over them in the wrong moment. On top of that, the shrunken enemies will now also not trigger any on-death effects, like exploding, shooting projectiles or spawning enemies when you walk over them. The Hashi familiar also got a buff that makes it quite a bit more useful. It will now fire a burst of tears in 8 directions while you hold it in place. Each of these shots will deal 6 damage to enemies, which will be a big DPS increase if you manage to position Hashi directly under a boss to hit it with all 8 tears at once. The It Hurts item got a slight buff by causing Isaac's tears to leave behind small puddles of red creep in the room after you took damage for the first time. This creep rapidly deals 2 damage per tick and stays active for a very long time. The Mars item will now grant you a 1-second shield at the end of the charge, to prevent you from instantly taking damage where you end up. Also, hitting a wall or obstacle with the charge will push surrounding enemies away to further decrease the chance of accidental damage. However, there is one thing that isn't listed in the patch notes. The activation of the item has a slight delay now, which can be good or bad depending on the situation. It is also worth to note that you can cancel the activation of the charge by quickly turning around before it triggers. While we are here, let's cover the other planetarium item that got buffed. In case you didn't know, because you never pick it up, Jupiter actually grants you 2 red heart containers. Before the patch, only half a heart of those containers was filled, but now both of them will come completely filled, ready to go. The Evil Charm item got a lot of useful utility added to it. It will now make you immune to the slow of spiderwebs, as well as the damage from flame attacks, fireplaces and poison mushrooms. And on top of that, it will also allow you to stand inside of enemy creep for 1 second before you start taking damage from it. The Vasculitis item got a small visual change because many players never took it for the confusion that came with it. The shots fired from killed enemies will now appear as blood clots to be easily distinguishable from regular hostile shots. The next buff is certainly the most unique one in the patch and a game breaker's dream. The little portal item got a complete rework. You will now have to double tap the fire button for it to launch. It will still summon a portal after consuming a few pickups, but instead of porting you to a random room on the floor, it will transport you to a completely new and unique room just for this item. This special little portal room can be used to collect and drop trinkets and consumables, or even items with the help of some other means such as the butter trinket, which conveniently can spawn inside of this room. This is useful because you can access this room on every single floor to take your stuff with you for some insane min-maxing. I didn't want to go into detail in this video too much, but I think it is worth to note a discovery I made with the new little portal. If you manage to create a trapdoor inside of the little portal room, said trapdoor will always lead you to the I am error room for even more stuff. This makes the little portal and we need to go deeper a great value engine. Now it is time to check out some beans, because there are 5 of them that got buffed in Repentance Plus. First up is the Linger Bean, which has its fart clouds now spawn after 4 seconds of constant shooting instead of 7. The farts will now start small and potent, with a lot of initial ticking damage, but they will grow bigger and weaker over time, which means they will cover a wider area in exchange for a decrease in ticking damage. Not quite the buff Lazy Madman had in mind in our collab video, but still a very cool and flavorful rework. The next bean in line is the Butter Bean. This one simply had its recharge time reduced from 3 seconds to 2 seconds, to make it even more useful for its intended purpose of deflecting shots and pushing away enemies. The item The Bean previously had a required charge of 1 room, which obviously meant you could only use it once per room. This has been changed to a timed recharge of 4 seconds, allowing you to utilize it multiple times in the same room for deflecting shots or poisoning enemies. The exact same treatment was given to the Kidney Bean item. It also has a recharge time of 4 seconds now, allowing you to charm enemies multiple times in the same room. You could probably try a pacifist run with this reworked item now. Well, almost I guess. The last bean, and also the last item to be buffed in this patch, is the Mega Bean. And to be honest, it totally lives up to its name now. It still petrifies all enemies in the room, but this is basically pointless now because the Mega Bean got the Mega buff. It will now send out a massive shockwave similar to that of the normal Mega item, but only in the current room. The shockwave deals 100 damage to all enemies while also destroying all obstacles in the room and opening all doors that can be bombed open, even secret room doors. Its required charge time was increased from 3 to 4 rooms, but this is a low price to pay for instantly deleting an entire room while also getting added utility on top of it. And in case you're wondering, yes, the new Mega Bean Fart is even able to open the boss rush and hush doors if you have been too slow to reach them in time. So we have yet another way to reach those without having to hurry. And there we have it. That was all the items that got buffed in the free Repentance Plus DLC. And in case you're wondering, there haven't been any nerfs this time around. What do you think about these buffs? Are you satisfied with the state of the game now, or are there other items that you feel like deserve a rework? Let me know in the comments. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel if you enjoyed your stay and feel like supporting me, and I will make sure to make even more Isaac showcases for you. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you again in the next one. Bye!
He's the number one,
Isaac!
God's favorite son. His flowing robes reach down from